The Humiliated Father I, 3rd of May 1961, Part 1 of 4. You know that this year I am trying to readjust the fundamental question that we face in our treatment of transference, by directing our thinking towards what has to be, to respond to this phenomenon, the analyst's position in this business. This position, I am making an effort to point it out at the most essential level, at the point at which I indicate, faced with, from the patient, this most profound call from her, his being, at the moment when he comes to us, asking for our aid and our help. What, to be rigorous, correct, impartial, also to be as open as the nature of the question that is posed to us prescribes us to be, what must be the analyst's desire? It is certainly not, in any way, adequate to content ourselves with thinking that the analyst, via her or his experience and theoretical framework, via the doctrine he represents, is something that would be in some way a modern equivalent, the authorized representative via the power of a method of research, a doctrine and a community, through what would be called a natural right, something that could redesignate anew the way towards a natural harmony accessible along the byways of a renewed experience of life. If this year I have relaunched my discourse before you, drawing on the Socratic experience, it is essentially in order to centre you, from the start, around this point through which it is asked of us, as experts, or even as bearers of a secret, which is not the secret of everything, which is a unique secret, and which, however, is worth more than everything of which we are ignorant and continue to be ignorant. This is something that is a given, from the beginning of the conditions, the establishment, the experience of psychoanalysis. As obscure as it is, those that come to find us know already, and if they don't know it, in treatment they will be rapidly orientated towards this notion, that this secret that we are deemed to be holding on to is precisely, as I say, more precious than everything of which we are ignorant and continue to be ignorant. And it is exactly due to the fact that this secret has to respond to the incompleteness of what is known. Is that true? Is it not true? On this point, it is not for me to decide one way or another. It is thus that the analytic experience, psychoanalytical treatment, puts itself forward, offers itself, is broached. It is thus that the something new that it introduces onto the human horizon, which is the one we share with our contemporaries, can be, from a certain perspective, defined. Deep down, for every one of us who tries out this experience, from whatever side we come at it, analysand or analyst, there is this supposition which, at a level that is very central, more essential for our conduct, there is this supposition. When I say supposition, I can even leave the way it is marked with a doubtful connotation. It is as a tentative exploration that treatment is undertaken, that it is undertaken most commonly by those who come to see us. The supposition that the impasses due to our ignorance are not, perhaps, determined by the fact that we get what we can be called the power relations of our profession wrong, that, in short, we cross-examine ourselves with false problems. And this supposition, this hope, I would say, with the optimism that comes with it, is made more likely by what has become common knowledge, that desire does not present itself with an unveiled face, that it is not even just at the place that the discipline, expérience, of secular philosophy, to call it by its name, has designated for it in order to contain it, in order to exclude it in a certain way from the right to rule over us. Far from it, desires are everywhere and even at the heart of our efforts to make us masters of them. Far from it, that even in combating them we hardly do more than get satisfaction, literally their satisfy. I say their satisfy and not satisfy them, for to satisfy them would again be to take them as being too graspable, as if we are able to say where they are. Their satisfy, y satisfaire, is said here in the same way as one says, in the opposite sense, to their cut, y couper, or not to their cut, even to the extent of it being a fundamental plan, exactly to cut there. Ah well, one doesn't cut there, and to such a small extent that it is not enough to avoid them for us not to feel more or less guilty, cuttable, coupable, i.e. guilty of them. In any case, whatever what we can bear witness to may be in relation to our project, what the analytic experience teaches us, first and foremost, is that man is marked, troubled by everything that is called a symptom, insofar as the symptom is this. It is, for these desires which we cannot define or limit or place, to always their satisfy in some way, and moreover without pleasure. It would seem that such a bitter doctrine implies that the analyst is the guardian, on some level, of the strangest approach. For if the accent is put on such a huge extension of the fundamental méconnaissance, and not, as it has been up till now, in the speculative form in which it emerges in some way with a question to be known, and in a form which I can't think better than to call it, at least in the instant that it comes to me, textual, in the sense that it is really a méconnaissance weaved from personal constructions in the widest sense, it is clear that in making this supposition the analyst must have overcome, and for many, if not deemed to have, at least deemed to have to overcome the pull of this méconnaissance, to have in her himself got over this stopping point that I indicate to you as that of the che vois, what do you want, there where all self-knowledge hits the buffers. At the very least, this route that I would call bien propre, meaning nice and clean, correct, owned, insofar as it is the agreement between one and another on an authentic level, would have to be open to the analyst her himself, and that at least on this particular point in clinical experience something could be grasped of this nature, of this natural, of this something that maintains itself in its own propre naivety. This something that you know that elsewhere than in the analytic experience, I don't know what skepticism, not to say disgust, I don't know what nihilism, to use the word with which the moralists of our epoch have labelled it, has grasped the entirety of our culture in what can be indicated as the measure of man. Nothing is further from modern thought, contemporary thought to be precise, than this natural idea so familiar throughout many centuries to those who, in some way, attempted to direct themselves towards a justly measured behaviour, with whom it would not even have seemed that this notion could be disputed. What one presumes of the analyst at this level should not even limit her his field of action, to have immediately to hand as he practices, that he is there, hic et nunc, here and now, as one says, but attributed to her, him as something habitual, if you give this word its full meaning, as referring more to the habitus in the scholastic sense, to this integration of oneself with the consistency of one's actions and in the form of one's own life with what constitutes the foundation of all virtue, than to the habituated insofar as it is orientated towards a simple notion of imprinting and passivity. This ideal, do I need dispute it before we could put a cross above it? It is not certain that we could evoke examples of the pure heart style in analysts. Hence, do we think it is thinkable that this ideal could be required in the analyst from the beginning, could in any way be sketched out? And if it could be attested to, we have to say that it is neither the usual way analysts work, nor what they are reputed for. Also, we could just as easily indicate the causes of our disappointment with these retarded formulas that we come out with at every moment, whenever we try to formulate in our magisterial register something that attains to the value of an ethic. It is not for pleasure, believe you me, that I dwell on such and such a formula, claiming to be qualifiable as analytic, showing its weaknesses, the false window, puerilely oppositional character of it, when in front of you I try to catch by the ankles the recent efforts, always admirable, to locate the ideals of our doctrine. I can very well see that such and such a formulation of the genital quality of the end point of analysis, of an identification of our goals with the pure and simple lifting of the impasses identified with what is pre-genital, will be sufficient to resolve all its antinomies. But I beg you to see what this supposes. What are the resulting consequences of such a display of impotent thinking about the truth of our endeavour, experience? It is within a very different relativism that the problem of human desire is located. And if we must be, as part of a patient searching, something more than simple companions to this searching, then at least we will never lose sight of this dimension that essentially fabricates the subject from desire, as I teach you the other's desire with a big O or big A in French. Desire is such that it can only be located, be positioned, and, by the same token, be understood within this basic alienation that is not simply linked to the struggle of man against man, but to the relationship with language. The other's desire, this genitive, is at the same time subjective and objective. Desire at the place where the other is, in order to be this place, desire for some alterity, and in order to satisfy this search for an objective, i.e., what does this other that we have just found desire? We have to lend ourselves here to this function of the subjective, that in some way we could for a time represent, definitely not at all the object as people think, as bless me would be derisory, you have to admit it, and how dumb as well, that we could be it, not at all the object targeted by desire, but the signifier. It is at once much less, but also much more, to think that we have to hold this empty place where this signifier is called upon, which can but nullify all the others, this phi that I am trying to show you the position of, and all its difficulties can be summarized thus. One must know how to fill out its place, insofar as the subject must be able to locate therein the missing signifier. And thus, via an antinomy, via a paradox that is our function, it is at the very place where we are supposed to know that we are called to being, and to being nothing more, nothing other than the real presence, and exactly insofar as it is unconscious.